Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. I was about 14 back then. I had skipped school and I decided to go to a mall. This mall was known to have creepy teenagers or men who stalk and hit on girls, and I've had some small experiences there before. But it was 8 a.m. and I didn't think anyone could do that in broad daylight. Well, they did. And since then, I haven't been back to that mall alone. I got off the bus and I went to the entrance that had a little playground in front of it. I thought that it would be safer if there were kids or families around. I sat on a swing and I pulled out my phone to pass some time until I could get back home. There was an old lady with her granddaughter on the kids slide near me, and I for sure felt safe being near them. After about 5 minutes of me scrolling on my phone, I heard the voices and screams of teenage boys. I looked up, and in a few seconds, they were running around and causing a commotion everywhere. And at that moment is when I started to not feel safe anymore because I knew to expect the worst. I knew them. The town and the city knew them. They were not nice people, even though they were teenagers a little older than me. I stood up to go inside because they started looking at me and sneakily going near me. I thought there would be a big crowd enough inside the mall for them not to follow me around and potentially do something. I went in a store inside the mall to buy myself something and take my mind off the situation. I didn't hear or see them on the walk to the store or on the walk back, where I sat on a couch that they had inside the mall. I really thought that I lost them. But I still didn't let myself feel safe enough though, not until I was out of there. A minute or two later, I was again scrolling on my phone when I saw them. This time, I didn't wait around. I stood up and I walked to the bathroom, which had a huge hall before you reach it. I noticed them following me and I walked faster. And when I reached the girls' bathroom, I went in one of the stalls and I stayed there for a full 30 to 40 minutes just on my phone until I thought that it has been long enough for them to give up and then leave. I exited the stall and I started washing my hands when I saw them. 6 boys peeking inside the girls' bathroom, which had no door, looking right at me and joking around with each other. A couple of them were close enough to be considered basically fully inside the bathroom, and I remember hearing one of them saying, "Yeah, I think it's her," or something like that to the other. That's when, while still washing my hands, I was frantically coming up with a plan. Do I just risk it and walk out? Do I call someone to get me? Do I ask someone to walk out with me? I went with the third option, and I looked around and there were maybe around 3 to 4 women there. The closest one to me was around 40 years old, and she was drying her hands. I had a fight with myself if I should ask her to walk out with me. And I decided to do it because I basically had no other safe option. I was shaking at this point, building up the courage to speak, and then I did. "Excuse me, I'm sorry. Can I walk out with you? There's this group of boys who have been following me around almost all morning, and they're waiting outside for me." There was a pause. Thoughts flooded my mind. I shouldn't have asked. She must think that I'm insane. But then she agreed, and we walked out. I didn't even glance at the direction of the boys. The woman's husband was waiting outside of the bathroom for her. Seeing him made me super relieved because now the boys would be hesitant to follow me and the woman because there was a man with us. She explained the situation to her husband. I could see that he didn't fully believe or understand the situation, but he ended up agreeing to walk out with me and his wife out of the long hallway to the exit. And while walking, I briefly explained how the boys had been following me, and they seemed to understand. When the end of the long hallway came, they went their way into a store, and I went off to the exit as fast as I could. When I passed the security guard, I felt safer, but not as safe as when I got out of that mall. When I was outside, I finally got some fresh air and I realized how panicked I was. I ran to the closest bus stop that was far enough from the mall, if that makes sense, and I came home early that day and didn't even care if anyone found out that I skipped school. I have been avoiding that mall as much as I can since then. I don't want to think about what would have happened if I were to walk out alone that day, or if I weren't so focused on my surroundings. To the woman and her husband who walked out with me, thank you. My name is Fred, and I played in a small local band. We were nothing big, just a group of friends who jammed together and occasionally played gigs at bars and even local events around the town in the 1980s. Music has always been my escape, a way to express what words cannot, and I play the guitar, and my bandmates say that I've got a knack for it. The band came into existence somewhat organically. It started with Mike, our drummer, who I met through a mutual friend. We clicked instantly over our shared love for old rock bands. And then there's Jenny, our bassist, who joined after we heard her play at an event one night. Her skills were undeniable, and she brought a new groove to our sound. And lastly, we had Jesus on the vocals. He's got this raw, powerful voice that commands attention and has always been the face of our band. We don't play for fame or money, but for us, it's about the joy of making music together, feeling that rush when a song comes together perfectly. We usually practice in Mike's garage, surrounded by old posters and instruments that we've picked up over the years. It's comfortable, it's a creative space where our ideas flow as easily as the music. Our biggest audience is usually made up of familiar faces, our friends, our family, and some locals who enjoy our sound. We don't expect much more than that, really. So, when we started seeing a new face at every gig, it caught my attention. She was always there, front row, watching intently. At first, I thought she was just another music lover, but there was something about her. I'm not saying that in an I'm in love kind of way. It was a I'm feeling uncomfortable kind of way. She stood out not just because she was always there, but because she had this intensity in her eyes. It was as if she was trying to memorize every chord, every lyric. I'd see her mouthing the words to our songs, and it was flattering at first. I mean, who wouldn't want a dedicated fan, right? But soon, it began to feel more personal. Our band started gaining a bit more attention locally, thanks to some decent write-ups in the town blogs. And that's when she started appearing off stage too. After our gigs, while packing up our gear, I would spot her hanging back, waiting near the exit or outside the venue. Once or twice, she tried to approach, but with the noise and bustle, it was easy to slip away unnoticed. Despite the growing crowd, her presence became something that I just couldn't ignore. She started showing up at places where I wouldn't expect. I'd see her at my favorite coffee shop, sitting a few tables away, or at a park where I sometimes went to clear my mind. She never approached me. She just watched from afar with that same intense gaze. I brushed it off at first, convinced that I was imagining things or being paranoid, After all, it was a small town and paths were bound to cross. But when she started to appear outside our band practice sessions, any semblance of coincidence vanished. We would wrap up a late night session only to find her standing across the street, partially hidden in the shadows, watching us pack up. It was unsettling, this constant feeling of being observed, so I talked to the band about it, but they laughed it off. To them, it was just a harmless fan, maybe a bit overenthusiastic, but definitely not a threat. Jesus even joked that it was good for our image to have real fans. But something about it just didn't sit right with me. I tried to ignore it, hoping that she would lose interest and move on. But instead, things escalated. I started receiving anonymous notes left under the windshield wipers of my car or slipped into my guitar case when I wasn't looking. They were meticulously handwritten, filled with detailed descriptions of our performances and personal comments that felt too intimate, too informed. The notes made it clear that she knew more about me than a casual fan should. Little things about my life that were never shared publicly. It was as if she had peeled back layers to see things meant only for me. I became hyper aware of my surroundings, looking over my shoulder more often than before. The joy that I found in playing in front of a lot of people started slipping away, replaced by anxiety and discomfort. One night, after a particularly draining gig, I found myself alone picking up my guitar in the empty venue. The others had left already. I was a bit late since I had to battle with nature in the toilet. I'm sorry for that. Well, as I turned to leave, there she was, standing directly in the doorway. Her presence in the dim light felt almost surreal. My heart pounded as I forced myself to stay calm. I was pretending to check my phone as I moved towards the exit. She didn't say a word, she just watched with those intense eyes that haunted me for weeks. I slipped past her, out into the cool night air, hoping that the darkness would swallow me up before she could follow. This encounter really creeped me out, so I reached out to a friend of mine who was working in law enforcement, and I explained the whole thing. He took it seriously, which was great. He then offered some advice on how to document everything and stay safe, saying that they really couldn't do anything if I didn't have definitive proof. From that point, I took precautions. I was always making sure that I wasn't alone when leaving gigs or practices. I informed the band again, who finally understood the seriousness of the situation. They offered their support, making sure that someone was always with me, especially when going home late at night. But funny enough, after everyone and even myself was taking this more seriously, the sightings became less frequent, as if she sensed the shift that I was documenting stuff and observing her more seriously. Playing with my band is still one of my greatest joys in life, but it's different. I'm more cautious, more aware of how exposed we are on stage, even in our small town bubble. It's a strange balance, finding comfort in the spotlight while knowing what lurks just beyond. But it taught me the value of boundaries. Anyway, I just wanted to share this creepy old story of mine. I was compelled to right after joining Reddit and then discovering this sub. So yeah, stay safe everyone, and rock on. So, this story was from years back. To start, it was me, a 13-year-old female, and my best friend, who was also 13 and female. I was a bit sheltered as a kid, and I was never allowed to walk around and explore outside the house. My mom was worried about weirdos and accidents, and I always thought that she was paranoid, till this day. It was around 5 p.m. and getting dimmer, and I convinced my best friend to go on a walk with me to this abandoned train just a couple blocks down. We would hang out there and annoy our friend who lives right next door to the abandoned tracks. We had walked out our house and barely made it a few doors down when we saw this yellowish beige car slowly pull up towards us. They stopped dead center in the middle of the road, and the car was basically a fishbowl, and we could see what looked to be 5 men cramped in it. They were all smiling, not even a friendly, excusable smile, but one of pure derangement and craze. 3 of them proceeded to get out of the car and stand there smiling at us like they were about to charge us. If I'm not misremembering, I think they also had popped their back trunk. I can't forget the face of the man closest to us. He was the creepiest. His smiling was menacing, and he was breathing heavy out of excitement. My best friend ran down the block immediately, and I followed after her. She turned the corner into the midsection between her neighborhood and the one behind. There was a gap between the neighboring fences, and we quickly ran into it far enough down that you couldn't see us the best. We waited for 2 to 3 minutes to see if they followed. And sure enough, we saw that same car driving past with all the men looking around to see where we had gone. We froze, hoping to God or anyone really that they didn't see us. Hoping that if they did, we could outrun them, or at worst, hoping that our screams could alert either side of the neighbors we were hiding behind. And after about a minute, we booked it back to our house and ran back inside hoping that they somehow weren't waiting for us. She shuddered out of breath. This is why we can't walk alone. And I felt guilty and terrified. We peeked out our blinds for 5 to 10 minutes seeing if they would come back, and sure enough, they did, and they were still slowly searching for us. We thankfully didn't have any other issues after that, but now I'm happy that my mom was always too scared to let us out of her sight. Who knows what could have happened any other time if this happened to us after our 3rd or 5th outing alone. I recently read a story on Let's Not Meet that brought back old memories of my dad's crazy ex-girlfriend. This took place when I was around 8 to 9 years old, so I guess it would have been the year 1997. My parents had gotten divorced several years prior, so me and my little sister, 2 years younger, used to stay with our dad every other weekend. One day, he introduced us to his new girlfriend, Rachel, who was a tall blonde woman that had apparently won some kind of beauty pageant or something. I remember those first months of getting to know Rachel as fun. She seemed like a nice lady. I also think that my initial impression of her was helped by the fact that she had a rather cuddly gray parrot and a pet raven that could talk, which of course made my younger self quite ecstatic. But after a while, things started to change. I began to notice that she could be a bit odd at times, seeing weird things or acting a bit strangely. We started seeing her less frequently when we were staying with our dad. Then one day, he told us that they had broken up and that we wouldn't be seeing her anymore. He also told us that we shouldn't talk to her or go home with her if she showed up at school. Not long after that, Rachel really started harassing my dad. She would randomly turn up at places we went to visit during weekends. She would be trying to talk with us. She called him non-stop on the phone when we were at home, crying, making threats. It usually didn't stop until he pulled the plug. And years later, I found out that she had even threatened to kill me and my sister on several occasions, and that dad got a restraining order. Rachel also keyed my dad's car, broke into his company to trash it, and stole a lot of money that he never got back. She even started writing threatening letters to my mom. My parents have always been good friends ever since the divorce, and it all culminated with a letter from the authorities. A letter accusing my dad of being a child molester. I still vividly remember how Mom sat us down in our room, holding the letter, a deep look of concern on her face, asking if Dad had ever touched us inappropriately. Which, of course, he never was. It later turned out that it was Rachel who had falsely accused him of such in an attempt to prevent him from seeing us. I remember feeling really angry and upset that she had gone to such lengths. The last memory that I have of Rachel was a few weeks before Christmas. We were staying at my dad's place over the weekend. It was a 2-story apartment complex with a large window spanning an entire wall, floor to ceiling, in the living room where we had just sat down to watch TV. Next to the window, there was a glass door leading onto a stone patio. It was bordering a lawn that ended with a tall hedge, and on this particular day, the outdoor lights had been switched off, which means it was pitch black outside as the intro to Superman started playing. A while into the episode, I suddenly heard a strange sharp noise coming from the window. It sounded like something was clawing on the glass in an attempt to get in. The sofa I was sitting on was placed right in front the window, so I had my back toward it when I slowly turned around to look over my shoulder, my heart thumping in my chest and my hairs standing on end as if I was being watched. But all that came into view was a pitch black darkness lurking behind my own reflection. By this point, Dad had also heard the sound and had gotten up to turn on the patio lights. When the outside suddenly flooded with light, I found myself staring into the face of a smiling blonde woman peering into the living room. Need I tell you that I screamed? Both me and my sister flew up from the couch like it had been scorched with fire, and then we ran behind our dad. When I looked toward the window again, I saw Rachel with both of her hands up against the glass, tightly cupped beside her face as she was trying to look inside. The patio door was right next to her. I tugged on Dad's shirt and I whispered if the door was locked when she reached out toward the handle. That millisecond of doubt flashing across my dad's face still haunts me to this day. Rachel truly looked like a madwoman as she furiously jerked on the handle in an attempt to get in, briefly pausing to peer through the glass now and again. I remember thinking Dad looked oddly calm as he ushered us around a corner wall, telling us to stay out of sight. As he walked toward the patio door, we begged him not to go outside, thinking that maybe she could have a knife hidden somewhere. So he opened up a small crack with the door, firmly holding onto the handle, and asked what the hell she was doing in the backyard. She tried to get him to let her in, putting on a big smile, tossing her hair, but Dad obviously wouldn't budge, telling her to leave or that he would call the cops, to which he eventually conceded, leaving a bunch of Christmas presents behind. When Rachel was out of sight from the window, Dad went out to make sure that she was gone, picking up what she had left behind on his way back. None of us wanted anything to do with the presents. Something just really felt off about them, so they ended up still fully wrapped in the trash. My name is Adam, and I used to think that breakups, while hard, were something that you could eventually move on from. I dated a girl named Janine for about a year. We met at a mutual friend's party. She was charming, fun, and had this infectious energy that drew people to her. For a while, we were very happy together. But over time, things changed. Our differences became more apparent, and what started as minor disagreements grew into full-blown arguments. When we finally decided to call it quits, it felt like the right decision for the both of us. I thought that we would part ways amicably, each going forward with our own lives. But it didn't turn out that way. Well, not for Janine. It started with harmless texts, little messages checking in on me, asking how I was doing and what I was doing. I didn't think much of it at that time, just an ex trying to be friends. But then, the messages became more frequent and their tone shifted. She started bringing up moments from our past, reminiscing about the times that we had spent together. It was as if she was trying to pull me back into something that I already let go of. I responded politely at first, hoping to set some boundaries, but it only seemed to encourage her. Janine's attempts to stay connected quickly turned intrusive. She began calling late at night, leaving voicemails that sounded more desperate with each one. I would wake up to find a series of missed calls and increasingly emotional messages. It was unsettling, hearing her voice through the speaker, going over things that felt long resolved. I tried to distance myself, so I didn't reply to her much, so that it would also give her space to move on. But then, she started appearing at places that I frequented, seemingly by coincidence. I'd see her at the coffee shop near my work, at the gym, even at the pet store when I was getting some food for my buddy. At first, I thought that it was just bad timing. But then, it became clear that she was deliberately showing up where she knew that I would be. The final straw was when one night, while I was at home watching TV, I heard a knock on my door. I was about to open it, which is unfortunately a habit of mine, but something in my gut told me to check first. It was so weird. It was such a strong feeling. So I did. I looked through the peephole, and I saw my ex, but there were two men behind her. I did not like the sight of that. I asked her through the door what she wanted, and she said that she just wanted to talk. I told her to leave, but that's when they started banging and kicking on the door. My dog started barking like crazy. I dialed 911 on my phone, and I told them what was happening, while also running around the house, checking if the doors and windows were locked. And then, when I made sure that they were all locked, I took my dog and we went inside my bedroom and locked ourselves in there. To the credit of the police, they did arrive in less than 5 minutes. They probably had a unit around close to my house for some reason. My ex and her 2 male cousins were taken away, and I then explained to the officer what happened. A long story short, she won't be bothering me anytime soon. Stay safe, guys. Choose your partner wisely, because some people are crazy. At the time that this encounter occurred, I was a female and 19 years old, and I had just closed the store that I was working at with another coworker. They drove home, and since I lived just right across the street, I thought that I was safe to walk home alone. After all, it's just a 2-minute walk to my apartment. The apartment that I lived in had an auto shop below the building, which my uncle owned. And this is important info, trust me. It was around 9:30 at night, so it was pretty dark out, and the roads were empty. Not even 10 seconds after I walked across the street, a dark blue minivan pulls up beside me out of nowhere, and this kinda startled me, so I looked at the driver in confusion. I was carrying some bags of stuff that I bought from work, and the guy driving the van noticed and asked if I needed a ride. I kindly declined his offer and just told him that I lived a few minutes away, and so I started to continue walking. But the guy started slowly following me and continued. Are you sure you don't need a ride? I mean, I don't mind. He asked again and again, and I continued to decline and I kept walking. But he was persistent, and this started to creep me out, so I started walking faster and I ignored him as he would repeatedly say things like, Come on, get in my car. Come on, get in the car. Get in the car. Come on, get in. I was afraid to run inside the apartment because I really didn't want this creep to know where I lived, so I was going to just loop back around the building to lose him. Thankfully, I noticed that the auto shop's lights were on and the garage door was open. My uncle must have been working late in the shop, so I sped walked towards the open garage, and the van sped off in a hurry as soon as they were about to pass by the open garage door. I told my uncle about what just happened and waited a few minutes before walking back out to get into my apartment. I locked all my doors and windows and I stayed in the living room until my dad came home from our cousin's house. And thankfully, I never saw that van again. I did finally buy some pepper spray after this incident. I usually always had my weighted pocket knife on me, but I had actually left it at home that day after using it to cut thick string for some crafts that I was working on. And to everyone, even if you only have to walk 2 minutes to get to your destination, even if you think you're safe, please treat it like it's a 20-minute walk home at night in a really sketchy town. Always be on high guard and continue with caution when going anywhere alone. If you at all don't feel safe walking alone and you have anyone like friends or family that you know you can trust that wouldn't mind giving you a ride or even tag along with you, don't be afraid to ask because it might just save your life. Hi everyone, my name is Chris, I'm female, and I'm 29, and I own a little flower shop nestled in the heart of town. It's a small business, but one that I have poured my heart into. Flowers have always fascinated me. Their colors, their scents, the way they can speak volumes without even uttering a word. Every day, I wake up early, excited to spend my hours surrounded by their beauty, arranging them into bouquets that brightens people's lives. Running a florist shop is not just about selling flowers. It's about being part of people's stories. I make arrangements for weddings, birthdays, and even those somber occasions like funerals. Each order carries its own significance, and I feel honored to be a part of those moments in some small way. I have a few regular customers who pop in throughout the week, but most days, I enjoy a steady flow of new faces, people who wander in off the street, drawn by the fresh blooms that line in the shop windows. It's really a peaceful job, one where I get to express creativity and share a bit of joy with the world. But today, I'm not writing solely to share about my job. I'm writing about an experience that I had that I considered somewhat scary, creepy, disturbing. I'm not quite sure what word is best to describe it, so I'm just gonna leave my story here and let you decide. A few months ago, a new customer started visiting the shop. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him. He appeared polite and reserved. He was asking simple questions about the different types of flowers and also their meanings. I was more than happy to help. I was enjoying the chance to share my knowledge and passion. He came in regularly, more frequently than most, and in each visit, he bought a small gift. It could be a single cookie, a little smiley note, always different from the last. I thought nothing of it initially, since those were very simple gifts. I thought that he just appreciated the work that I do. Lots of people enjoy having fresh flowers at home, so maybe it was to thank me for that. But over time, I started noticing a pattern. He was always there, lingering in the shop, watching me closely as I worked. He began asking questions that felt too personal, wanting to know more about my life beyond the shop. I tried to keep the conversation light and professional, always steering it back to the flowers and their care. But his interest in me felt different, and it was starting to make me uneasy. One day, as I was closing up, I noticed him standing across the street. He didn't approach or wave, he just stood there watching as I locked the doors. It left a knot in my stomach, a feeling that I couldn't quite shake off. What the hell is he doing? I tried to wave at him, but he didn't wave back or say anything, so I just walked on and headed home. I convinced myself that it was harmless. Maybe he was just having a rough day. But then, he started showing up outside of the shop. And I would see him in grocery stores, the park where I took my morning walks, even at the cafe that I frequented on weekends. It was hard to dismiss as a coincidence when it happened so often, almost like he knew my schedule. The unease grew into something more when I received a letter in the mail. It wasn't like the usual orders or thank you notes that I sometimes get from the customers. This one was different. It was addressed directly to me with no return address. Inside, it was a single photo of me, one that looked like I didn't know that there was even a camera, and it was on a day where I wasn't in the shop. It also had confessions of love and admirations, and there was no sign of who sent it at the bottom. Reading it sent chills down my spine. It was clear that someone was watching me closely, and I couldn't help but connect the dots back to him. The thought of having an unwanted observer tracking my life was frightening. It made the world feel smaller, less safe. I became more cautious, and I was altering my routine slightly, trying to avoid being too predictable, and I started leaving the shop at different times, taking alternate routes going home, hoping to shake off the feeling of being followed. But everywhere I went, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see him there. Despite the growing tension, I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy in the shop. My work was my refuge, a place where I could focus on beauty of the flowers and forget, if only for a moment, the creepy person or shadow or whatever that seemed to lurk in my life. But his presence was persistent. One evening after closing, I found a single flower left on the doorstep, a lily, my favorite. At first, I thought that it was just a kind gesture, but in context, and after everything that happened, it felt like something darker, a message meant only for me. Well, one night, everything was confirmed when he came into my shop again. I felt a chill, but I acted normal and professional, asking him with what I can help him with. And the words that came out of his mouth next was something that I kind of expected, but still gave me a shock and definitely frightened me. I can't remember it word for word, of course, but it was something along the lines of, "Why? Why are you not interested in me? Have I not been giving you enough attention? Am I not enough for you?" The way he said it wasn't sad. It was full of anger and desperation. I told him that I am not interested in being in any kind of relationship at all, since I am busy working on my business and my dreams, and that I am sorry for not being able to return his feelings, but I'm just not interested. His expression became dark after I said those, and he looked like he was coming closer to me. So I told him that I will be willing to call the police if he doesn't leave me and my shop alone. That must have snapped him out of whatever he was thinking. And then he turned around, but before he left, he said, "This isn't over." I'm not gonna lie. I tried my best to act brave, but damn, was I scared out of my mind. I knew that I needed to take action, especially with the threat he left. I reached out to a friend who understood my situation. I explained everything that had happened. It was actually a relief to talk about it, to have someone validate my fears. Together, we decided that it was the best time to involve the authorities. I reached out to the authorities and I filed a report. They said that they couldn't do much without proof. But then I remembered that these things happened in my shop that had my security cameras. I gave them access to it, and they were able to trace back not only the latest interaction, but even the past multiple occurrences when he came to my shop. I was able to file a restraining order against him, and everything went back to normal. I apologize if there wasn't something in my story that seems very scary or dramatic, but to me, it was one of the scariest things that I have ever been through. So, to the man who stalked me in my own flower shop, let's not meet again. And just before we go to the riddle, I would like to greet Wyatt a belated happy birthday, and to his lovely daughter an advance happy birthday. I hope both of you have an amazing year ahead. And here's the riddle for this video. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. I would also like to give some extra love to my Patreon members, my channel members, and also my tippers. Thank you so much. If you would like to extend a little bit more support for the channel, don't forget to leave a like and a comment down below. If you would like to become a Patreon member, a channel member, a tipper, or even to buy merch, check out the links in the description below. Again, thank you. And I hope you stay scared, because your fear feeds me.